Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be back with my family, and we will begin with the line on 205, just after the break, as from a womb obscure. And as you know, these passages are very, very challenging because we have not seen what Sri Aurobindo has seen. And yet he's trying to, in so many different ways, to show us what he has seen so that it can perhaps sink into our inner being, the intercontinental being, or interbeing, which we feel is just not quite at the psychic yet, a little bit before the psychic. So let us see if we can understand it a bit. As from a womb obscure, he saw emerge the body and visage of a dark unseen, hidden behind the fair outsides of life. Well, if we have read Sri Aurobindo and Mother fairly often, at least, we know something about this dark unseen. Mother tells it in a parable early on about these wonderful emanations that she sent down. And they were so powerful that they decided to become the opposite of what was needed for this divine life to come. And so love turned into hate, etc. And we are now left in a world that before the supramental descent, there was not a lot of hope of total transformation. But with the supermind, it has opened up now, not only as a possibility or a potentiality, but as a promise to all of us. So he sees this dark unseen emerge as from a womb, but it's an obscure thing that he sees, and it's actually hidden behind the fair outsides of life. And we do have Mother telling us that this, or at least aspects of this dark unseen, are in each of us as well, because we are the world. We are an individual, we are the one, and we are the multitude. So our work on earth now, of course, is to continue to eject these darknesses that are still in us from past births, obviously, and the present also. So we'll continue. Its dangerous commerce is our suffering's cause. Its breath is a subtle poison in men's hearts. And here Sri Aurobindo has said much more beautifully than what I just said. All evil starts from that ambiguous face. See, it's an ambiguous face. It's not clear. It's a dark unseen. It's something that has subtle poison in men's hearts. So Ashwapati, who actually is Sri Aurobindo, is seeing these things on these graded planes of existence that he called the world stair. And now what is he seeing? He's seeing a lot more, and it's frightening. A peril haunted now the common air. The world grew full of menacing energies, and wherever it turned for help or hope, his eyes, in field and house, in street and camp and mart, he met the prowl and stealthy come and go of armed, disquieting, bodied influences. Now, there's a lot here to look at, because what we see now is that peril that seems to be haunting even our common air. And I can say that that peril is also the pollution of our world, of our rivers, of our seas, of our soil, of our air, with all these toxic elements that man has put forward on the earth. So he tells us the world grew full of menacing energies. And notice he capitalizes energies. He wants us to know very clearly that this is the essence, this word energies, of these beings. This ambiguous face, this peril, this dark unseen, this body and this visage, in fact, of it. And wherever he turns for help or hope, wherever he turns his eyes, he sees in field and house, in street and camp and mart. What did he do? He met the prowl and stealthy come and go of armed, disquieting, bodied influences. Now, this is very important, because these are not ghosts or figments of someone's imagination or, some fancy. These are bodied influences. And of course, an influence here is something that, through an action or a process, threatens someone. It has effects on their actions, on their behavior. So what is it actually? There's a full stop after influences. Now he'll tell us a march of goddess figures, dark and nude, alarmed the air with grandiose unease. Appalling footsteps drew invisibly near. Shapes that were threats invaded the dreamlight, and ominous beings passed him on the road, whose very gaze was a calamity. Let's go through these lines a bit, because this is very, very, very significant and very powerful. Look at the words he uses: prowl, stealthy come and go, disquieting, bodied influences. Now, this march of goddess figures, a march of goddess figures, dark and nude. Look at that. They're unclothed. They're dark. And they're marching. And therefore they alarm the air with grandiose unease. We've spoken often about the word grandiose, and it is not ever used in Savitri in a pejorative sense, but only in the sense of something grand and magnificent. Interesting, because grandiose unease sounds very paradoxical. appalling footsteps drew invisibly near. So he sees and he hears these footsteps that are drawing near, but they're invisible, but he knows they are drawing near. Shapes that were threats invaded the dreamlight. Oh, how poignant. Shapes that were threats invaded the dreamlight. And ominous beings passed him on the road. Wow. Ominous, evil, foreboding evil, passing him on the road. Now we know that Sri Aurobindo, as Ashwapati, has already gained such powers in Book 1, Canto 3 and 5, that they can't really touch him. But there is an impact and there is an impress whose very gaze was a calamity. There were times when I have experienced these beings, and the only way out, the only solution was to take Ma, take her name, and then they would go. They would have no power in front of her name. But now there's a colon after calamity. So we read next, a charm and a sweetness, sudden and formidable, faces that raised alluring lips and eyes, approached him, armed with beauty like a snare. And what else but hid a fatal meaning in each line. Oh, so I have to go to the next page. And could, in a moment, dangerously change. So these beings who have gathered in themselves such power are able to approach Ashwapati. And even though they are armed with beauty like a snare, and even though they hid a fatal meaning in each line, and could, in a moment, dangerously change, he sees all of this. He sees them coming toward him, in fact. And even though they seem to be beautiful, armed with beauty, but like a snare, they still hid a fatal meaning in each line. And they could, of course, in a moment, dangerously change. So this is extraordinarily important. If they could be this way in front of Sri Aurobindo, how much more dangerous for us. And that's why our only hope is to take Mother's name. So now Sri Aurobindo is going to tell us that Ashwapati, but he alone discerned that screened attack. Of course, nothing was impossible for his view, transcendent view. A veil upon the inner vision lay. A force was there that hid its dreadful steps. All was belied, yet thought itself the truth. So this interesting word belied is just shown to be false, contradicted. It actually gave a false representation to. In other words, it misrepresented everything. So he alone discerned. In other words, he was able to perceive by sight or some other sense this acuteness of judgment, this discrimination. He could see that, and he knew it as a screened attack. A veil upon the inner vision lay. A force was there that hid its dreadful steps. All was belied, yet thought itself the truth. All were beset, but knew not of the siege. Now, if someone is beset, they are actually attacked from all sides. They're surrounded, they're hemmed in. For none could see the authors of their fall. Now we must remember that this is the book of the traveler of the worlds, and this is what Ashwapati is seeing. And he's seeing these beings in this world who didn't understand that it was a siege, even though they were beset, and even though everything was belied, yet it thought itself the truth. For none could see the authors of their fall. They were not able to see these beings that we've just discussed in this whole passage. That was the seal and warrant of this strength. Now, a warrant, of course, is a justification, an authorization, even a sanction. And he followed, this is Ashwapati.
There was one more line. Aware of some dark wisdom still.
Sorry. Yeah. Aware of some dark wisdom still withheld. So even though none could see the authors of their fall, Ashwapati was aware of some dark wisdom still withheld. That was the seal and warrant of this strength. And what did he do? He followed the track of dim, tremendous steps, returning to the night from which they came. So Mother and Sri Aurobindo tell us very often that we do have a correspondence with all of these planes of existence. Now, we are perhaps not aware of them in our outward selves, but within there is some dark wisdom that we can catch hold of. And that is the seal and warrant of the strength of these beings in this plane of existence. Therefore, Ashwapati followed the track of dim, tremendous steps, returning to the night from which they came. Now you see, he uses the word track, and then he uses tract in the next line. A tract he reached, unbuilt and owned by none. There all could enter, but none stay for long. And this is something that we have seen with these asuras and rakshasas and pisachas, that they can grab a hold of us and we can be with them for a while, but eventually they either tire of us or we conquer and defeat their influences. So I'm going to stop there now because it's quite late, and I'd like someone to read a passage. Now we have a few new people. We have Tukun and we have Chitrik. Would one of you read for us the entire passage that we've been through today?
I think they are muted.
Oh,
No, I
Yes,
can read.
you
I can read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please do.
okay. Wonderful.
As from a womb obscure, he saw emerge the body and visage of a dark unseen, hidden behind the fair outsides of life. Its dangerous commerce is our suffering's cause. Its breath is a subtle poison in men's hearts. All evil starts from that ambiguous face. A peril haunted now the common air. The world grew full of menacing energies, and wherever turned for help or hope his eyes, in field and house, in street and camp, and he met the prowl and stealthy come and go of armed, disquieting, bodied influences. A march of goddess figures, dark and nude, alarmed the air with grandiose unease. Appalling footsteps drew invisibly near. Shapes that were threats invaded the dream light, and ominous beings passed him on the road, whose very gaze was a calamity. A charm and sweetness, sudden and formidable, faces that raised alluring lips and eyes, approached him armed with beauty like a snare, but hid a fatal meaning in each line, and could in a moment dangerously change. But he alone discerned that screened attack. A veil upon the inner vision lay. A force was there that hid its dreadful steps. All was belied, yet thought itself the truth. All were beset, but knew not of the sage, for none could see the authors of their fall. Aware of some dark wisdom still withheld, that was the seal and warrant of this strength, he followed the track of dim, tremendous steps, returning to the night from which they came. A tract he reached, unbuilt and owned by none. There all could enter, but none stay for long. It
Thank you so
was
much.
no man's land of evil.
I think that's where we ended. We'll begin there next week. It was a no man's land. And we'll talk about that no man's land from Sri Aurobindo. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste.
Are there any questions?
Well, I had some the question for grammar. This usage of be in front of the verbs like beget, beset, belied. It's quite interesting in a way in English language. It turns it most probably onto itself, yes? It makes it more like a middle voice or something. So to be set, yes, around, to be lied around, something like that. I was just wondering about this be in front.
Ah, yes, good point, good point.
Mm.
Sri Aurobindo does talk about, not exactly in English, but in other languages, the accent is most often shifted to the first syllable.
Mm.
Ukes. Ukes is a good example in Russian,
Yes. Ukaz, yes.
or ukas, yes,
Ukaz is Russian, yes.
right. Good.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Namaste.
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 See you next time.